What's up, everybody? Welcome back to The Devil's in the Details. I'm BD.
Danger, Will Robinson!
In the early 60s, science fiction television shows were starting to gain a lot of traction, with the popularity of shows like The Twilight Zone and The Outer Limits becoming more and more popular.
Other shows started popping up like Thunderbirds, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, culminating with Star Trek, the original series that ran from 1966 to 1969.
Hello, computer.
One of those early sci-fi productions, which has recently become relevant once again thanks to juggernaut Netflix, was the CBS television show Lost in Space.
The concept was loosely based on the Johann David Weiss novel, The Swiss Family Robinson, which was first published in 1812.
Lost in Space was created and produced by Irwin Allen for CBS. The series followed the adventures of a pioneering family of space colonists who struggle to survive in a strange and often hostile universe after the ship is sabotaged and thrown off course.
The extremely catchy opening and closing theme was written by none other than John Williams.
The show ran for 3 seasons, with 83 episodes in total, airing between 1965 and 1968. The first season was filmed in black and white, and the second and third seasons were filmed in color.
The show was centered on the Robinson family. Many of the storylines focused primarily on Dr. Zachary Smith, played by Jonathan Harris.
Smith and Robot B9 were both absent from the pilot, as the addition of the characters was only decided upon once the series had been picked up and commissioned for production.
Originally written as an utterly evil and careless saboteur, Smith gradually became a troublesome, self-centered, incompetent character who provided the comic relief for the show and caused much of the conflict and misadventures.
Although the original concept was depicted in the pilot episode No Place to Hide, that pilot was never aired, not until 1997 anyhow.
In the unaired pilot, what caused the group to become lost in space was a chance encounter with a meteor storm, but in the aired episode, it was Smith's unplanned presence on the ship that sent it off course into the meteor field, combined with his sabotage of the robot that caused B9 to accelerate the ship into hyperdrive.
Incompleted circuit. Incompleted circuit. Damage may result.
Smith thus becoming key to the story. The story or premise of the show went as follows. On October 16, 1997, 32 years in the future from the perspective of the viewers in 1965, the United States were about to launch one of history's greatest adventures, man's colonization of space.
The Jupiter 2, or the Gemini 12 as it was named in the unaired pilot, was a futuristic saucer-shaped spacecraft which stood on its launch pad undergoing final preparations.
Its mission was to take a single family on a 5.5-year journey, also altered from 98 years in the unaired pilot to a planet orbiting the nearest star, Alpha Centauri.
The pilot show had referred to the planet itself as Alpha Centauri, but the error was corrected in the series.
Space probes had revealed that the planet possessed ideal conditions for human life. All of this was presented as a news report of a real space expedition, with some commentators informing us to the mission's backstory.
The Robinson family, selected from 2 million volunteers for this mission, consisted of Professor John Robinson, played by Guy Williams, his wife Maureen, played by June Lockhart, their children, Judy, played by Marta Kristen, Penny by Angela Cartwright, and Will, portrayed by Bill Mumy.
The family is also accompanied by a pilot, U.S. Space Corps Major Donald West, played by Mark Goddard, who is trained to fly the ship when the time comes for the eventual landing.
Initially, the Robinsons and Major West are in cryogenic freezing tubes for the voyage, with the tubes opening once the spacecraft approached its final destination. Unless,
of course, there's a problem with the ship's navigation or guidance system during the voyage. It turns out that Dr. Smith, Alpha Control's doctor, and later supposedly a psychiatrist and environmental control expert, was moonlighting as a secret agent for one of the United States' competing nations.
After disposing of a guard who catches him on board the spacecraft, Smith reprograms the Jupiter 2's B9 environmental control robot, voiced by Dick Tofeld, to destroy critical systems on the spaceship 8 hours after launch.
Smith, however, unintentionally becomes trapped aboard at launch, and it's his extra weight that throws the Jupiter 2 off course, causing it to encounter the meteor storm.
We've been working on it. Our computers tell us there's close to 200 pounds excess weight aboard. It has altered the flight pattern.
Abort the mission. Can you hear me? Abort!
This, combined with the robot's rampage, is what causes the ship to prematurely engage its hyperdrive system and causes the expedition to become hopelessly lost in the infinite depths of outer space.
We're out of it. But we'll never know how far out, of course.
Throughout the show's run, the Robinsons are regularly placed in danger by Smith, whose selfish actions and laziness endanger the family frequently.
After the first half of the season, Smith's role assumes less sinister overtones, although he continues to display many character flaws.
In one episode called The Time Merchant, Smith shows he actually does care about the Robinsons when he travels back in time to the day that the Jupiter 2 launched,
with the hope of changing his own fate by not boarding the ship, so allowing the Robinsons to start the mission as originally planned.
However, he learns that without his weight altering the ship's course, the Jupiter 2 will be destroyed by an uncharted asteroid. So, he sacrifices his chance to stay on his beloved Earth, electing to reboard the ship, thus saving the lives of the family and continuing his role amongst them as a reluctant stowaway.
Lost in Space originated in 1962 when Gold Key Comics published a comic book with the first appearance of a space-faring Robinson family.
The comic book and the show were originally titled The Space Family Robinson.
But after the television show launched 3 years later in 1965, during its run, CBS and 20th Century Fox reached an agreement with Gold Key Comics that allowed the use of the name Robinson on the TV show.
In return, the comic was allowed to add Lost in Space to its title, with the potential for the TV show to propel additional sales of the comic.
Props and monsters were regularly recycled from other Irwin Allen shows as a matter of budgetary convenience.
You might spot an alien from Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea one week appear in a Lost in Space episode the next week with its color altered after having been spray painted.
Spacecraft models also were routinely reused, sometimes just given a new paint job, other times flipped upside down to make them look completely different.
Although the show spawned many catchphrases, the one most remembered is Danger Will Robinson.
But the phrase was only ever used once during the entire series, during Season 3, Episode 11.
Danger, Will Robinson. Danger.
It's just a plain old meteorite. Come on.
No, Will Robinson. Danger.
And it was also used as the slogan of the 1998 movie, whose official website had the address dangerwillrobinson.com.
In early 1968, while the final third season episode Junkyard in Space was in production, the cast and crew were informally made to believe that the series would return for a fourth season.
Allen had ordered new scripts for the coming season. A few weeks later, however, CBS announced a list of television series they were renewing for the 1968-69 season, and Lost in Space was not included.
As there was no official final episode, the exploring pioneers never made it to Alpha Centauri, nor did they find their way back home.
The series finale ended like almost every other episode from the show, on a cliffhanger.
Many reasons have been speculated why the show was cancelled, but one of them was definitely not the lack of ratings.
The show had sufficient ratings and viewership to support a fourth season.
One of the more likely explanations for the cancellation would be the price tag per episode.
It was an expensive show to produce. The budget per episode for season 1 was $131,000. By the time they got to season 3, episodes were costing $165,000 to produce.
Cast salaries had also doubled. The interior of the Jupiter 2 was the most expensive set ever built for a television show, at the time costing around $350,000.
Widely reported also at the time was that 20th Century Fox was still recovering from the legendary budget overruns of Cleopatra, a box office disaster, and thus forced Fox to slash budgets across the board in both its film and television productions.
Even after its cancellation, however, the show remained successful in reruns and syndication for many years, appearing on the USA Network in the mid to late 80s.
Most recently on FX, Sci-Fi, and ALN, it's currently available on Hulu streaming video and is seen on Saturday nights on MeTV.
There are also fan clubs in honor of this series and cast all around the world.
Many Facebook group pages connecting fans of the show to each other and the show's stars.
The show's legacy remains alive to this day.
In 1998, New Line Cinema produced a Lost in Space film, which included numerous nods and cameos related to the series, including Dick Tofeld reprising his role as the robot's voice.
Mark Goddard played the military general who gives Major West his orders for the mission.
June Lockhart played the principal of Will Robinson's school.
Both Angela Cartwright and Marta Kristen appeared as reporters.
The film's Jupiter 2 was launched into orbit by a vehicle called the Jupiter 1, which closely mimics the series' spacecraft complete with rotating propulsion lights.
In 2004, there was an attempt to revive the show on television.
A pilot episode was written by Douglas Petrie and it was directed by John Woo. It was titled The Robinsons, Lost in Space.
When the series wasn't picked up, the set of the Jupiter 2 was sold and reused for the set of the Pegasus on the newly rebooted Battlestar Galactica.
Recently released on Netflix is a 10-episode reimagining of the 1965 series, also filled to the brim with Easter eggs from the original, which I highly recommend you put on your to-watch list. I promise you won't be disappointed.
Man, that was a long one this week, but we really hope you enjoyed our episode, and a huge thank you to our patrons who support us every month.
Thank you to everyone who continues to tune in, share, like, and subscribe.
Were you a fan of the original Lost in Space? What did you think of the movie?
And have you watched the recently rebooted Netflix series?
Please let us know in the comment section down below.
Thank you.
We love you.
Good night.
The odds are very good.
Obviously, you've miscalculated. Again.
There is always a margin of error, even in a machine. Only Dr. Zachary Smith is perfect.
I am indeed, and don't you forget about it. Are you sure you're not laughing at me?